I will say though, because it's important, part of the conversation is that men are not speaking.
Welcome to the Outer Fringe. I am so excited to be here today with Kirstin Gold. It's really cool how we met. I met with a guy who is also coming on to the podcast in the future, and he was actually telling me about you, Kirstin, and he's like, oh, you got to meet my friend. She's opening a shop, and I know you guys would just totally hit it off. And I was actually at Goddess Fest, and I walked up to his booth, and sure enough, you walked up at the same time, and he's like, oh my God, this is who I was telling you about. And it just was like totally not a coincidence. So having you here today it's a huge treat, and there's definitely a higher reason you're sitting in this chair. So I'm just really glad you're here. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm here.
And you know, I got a chance to really sit down with you. I got to get a reading by Kirstin, which was really amazing. And your story is just so fascinating to me, where you came from, you know, working in a very male-dominant career, and then to where you've come. And I want to hear a little bit about what brought you to your line of work today, a little backstory, and what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll start with where I just left. I just left a company where I was the chief compliance officer for a New York Stock Exchange technology and telecommunications company. And my background is telecommunications and investor relations and fundraising and investment banking. So you're right. I come from a very male-dominated world. But going back to as early as I can remember, there were a couple things. I don't believe that I was from here, but I didn't get that. I didn't get that understanding. I come from a home that was broken and needed to find a solution that could actually keep me alive, because wanting to die was part of my story. And I've spent most of my early teenagehood trying to commit suicide and not being taken. And it wouldn't happen. And then over the years, I mean, I have a fascination for really hot guys. So I would start like doing, candles and spells and stuff, trying to get the boyfriend, right? Trying to get the hot guy to like me. And 9 out of 10 times he never did, but sometimes I would find that this stuff would work. So, that was kind of the beginning of it. But at the same time, I was placed in a school I was in the top 2% in the country. I tested out in the top 2% of the country. So I was put into a special school, but couldn't sustain it because my family life didn't allow for me to really thrive. So as a teenager, I kind of went off the rails, but I have a math aptitude, although I hate it, right? So I've been in this my life pulled me towards finance, but it's an area I absolutely hate, but it's an area I'm very good at. And over time, I just would trip into success, right? I would start as, I would just get a job, and I would be hired on as an administrative assistant. And before you knew it, I was manager of investor relations. And before you knew it, I was offered a higher position. And because I'm good, I take the bull by the horns, I run faster than the pedigree, right? Pedigree comes in with a sense of entitlement and a sense of, I got here because of my degree, but the work doesn't mirror who they really what's required. So I always knew if I was just patient enough, I can outrun any of the dudes walking in. And I've proved it time and time again. But the whole time, my spiritual life continued to grow. And when I say spiritual life, I believe in everything. There's nothing that's been left off the table in my studies. So I range from shamanism to Kabbalah to Judaism to Catholicism to Christianity. I mean, you name it, if it's out there, Native American studies, and I've studied a lot. So I believe, and I guess the best way to say, I was talking about this yesterday with somebody, the best way to explain my spiritual activity is knowing that there's everything and possibly the idea that there's nothing, right? So with that, it's almost like a scientific mind. I do believe in quantum physics. I believe in all of the components of that. But I've been running a corporate career, and I also was a single parent. I had an absentee father I chose a man who's not capable of being a father. So raising them, I had to do what I had to do to support my children. So I stayed in a job I hated. And yeah, that was most of my career. But my spiritual awakening has always been there. But the real one for me was I was going through an organization, Landmark Education. And, we would create these games. I went through a lot of leadership training. And the game I created that year was I wanted to make $250,000. But there was no connection to God's will or higher being's will. It was really a self-will driven experience. And I've always loved getting my tarot cards read and at that time I was in investment banking. I had left a corporate job that I had been at for 8 years and went into investment banking because it allowed me to raise my children and be home. And this was I ate what I killed. So it was 100% commission. And I was a top performer 4 years in a row. But this year, the goal was $250,000 because I was playing that game. And I had the woman who was reading my tarot card. She said to me, you can have everything you want. You'll get to the top. You'll get the money. You'll get the house. You'll get there. But you'll have nothing that you want. And I don't know why that hit me so profoundly. My oldest daughter got really sick. And I took them on a huge cruise that year. I spent all kinds of money. That was the Christmas I was able to buy him everything. And it's a single parent. That doesn't happen often. But my kids were so unhappy. And I met that $250,000 mark. But they were so unhappy. It was right before Goldman Sachs, when the crash came, went through the crash. So I actually went in, packed up my box, gave my black book to my peers, told my boss, and I was in the running to move up into a partnership level. I walked out and then I crashed and went into a depression for about a year and really went into an expansion to find out who I was and what I was about. And my kids and I lost everything. So I went from making $250,000 to losing everything. And in that period, when you're in that black abyss and you have to find out exactly who you are and what your connection is to, and if you're even going to make it, that was when I really began to expand and explore in a much deeper way the spirituality. And then I went back into corporate out of necessity. But I just was never the same after that because I knew that I had to be on a path that was larger than me. Simply making money for people was not enough. And I was really tired of who's getting the money. Like the who is in control really kind of disgusts me, right? Like we have to transfer the power, and money equals power. So we have to transfer the money and the power so we can shift the way the world's going. And then this last job I landed in, and I can't say much about it because it's still ongoing, but there was some pretty nefarious shit. And as a compliance officer, we've had the CEO has resigned, the CFO has resigned, and, it feels like the New York Mafia every day in that place. And I recently left in June, and that's when I knew, my purpose, and I've just opened up the store, Pure Intellikey, my purpose is to find a way to do this differently. Yeah. Because what's happening can't keep going. It just can't. So it's a little bit of my story and how I transferred into this.
I was just explaining last night, and I'm grooving on a lot of your backstory because that's kind of how I feel, tried to do the gifted and talented thing, and then at some point I decided I want to hang out and be friends and not known as a geek.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I kind of was like,
oh, so we're in the nerd club together.
Yeah, totally. And numbers come easy, but I do not want to do them. But that's currently what I do. But I was explaining to somebody last night because we were downtown on 8th Street, And I was like, no, that building over there, there's a company that actually controls the stock market. Because not only do they write the algorithms, but then they push so much money one way into an investment, and then there's an alpha down on the beta, and then they can actually like produce because of other computer algorithms that they know how they're going to react. And so all this happens within milliseconds. So like, yeah, your Apple, your Google is going to go up over time, but all these tiny little things where if they push 10 billion, they could make 2 million in like a second and a half.
Yeah.
Because they see the reactions and stuff. And I'm like, that's scary. Because all this asset management that 100%, people have.
100%.
Yeah. And so like it's down to real estate might be the only real asset. And then of course you see like all these huge real estate numbers going up high, but that's because the dollar is also being devaluated so quickly. People don't understand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And what's being missed, because you're really tapping into the undertone of the spirit world that's occurring, right? So this is a belief that I have. I don't know it to be true yet. I haven't been proven right. But all of the economic indicators, if anybody really studies the economy, none of it work. None of it. So the fact that our stock market is excelling must be because there's algorithms keeping the stock inflated and keeping the wealthy, right? A normal, like if you're running all those algorithms through, there's no more day traders on the floor with paper, like in the old days, right? Now it's all computer generated and computer simulated.
Right.
And if Cambridge Analytica can actually shift elections throughout the world, they can very easily flip our switch. So people have a very skewed understanding of the economy and its stability. We're actually probably in one of the most unstable places we've been in. And then with the advent of Mark Zuckerberg's new global dollar, there's going to be no more monetary system here within a year or two because that company, eBay, has signed on, all the banks have signed on, and we're about to wash away the dollar. So there is the perception of what the global economy is doing and what the American economy is doing. It's just a ruse to keep us from not seeing. So I think you really got the key of how people are using algorithms to manage Wall Street. It's an artificial number.
Well, on the base of those algorithms, at some point, they're still going off of like reported assets and reported profits.
Right.
So that, the base number of, I'm just going to say like Apple 600, Google. I actually haven't looked at those ones because usually those are not the stocks that I'm tracking. They're at a point where it's like the percentage is small. So I just know they're high up there. But that is based on some real assets, some real profits, profit numbers. But
but if you actually understand the basis of financials, right? GAAP accounting in and of itself, we call it pixie dust, right? Like GAAP is the way that you normalize cash flow, right? So you can really create a financial statement to make it look any way you want to, and it takes very few analytical people can actually dig in deeper and understand what's happening to the fundamentals.
And that's currently how I make a little money.
Fascinating.
You're getting that pixie dust sprinkled all over you.
Like, I also look at like my cousin, I feel bad for her, but she was on the other side. She was representing AIG for the, the mortgage financial packages they were using that helped, the crash happened in 2008, the mortgage crisis. And so she was doing that, making $250,000 a year, working 80, 90 hours a week, never away from her office except to get like a quick, New York, Manhattan, down like $100, $150 steak dinner, like another $150 tapas, go right back to work. An apartment that she never sees that's filled with glorious amounts of wine. Just, like a chapel of wine. Oh, and you said you're into all these different religions. So like a lot of what I really enjoy doing is I go to religious places and then I see things that are really, really different. And because I'm not spiritually connected to them, I'm kind of like anthropology kind of connected to it. Like I was in Montserrat a couple of weeks ago, and so the weird one there was the Black Madonna. So in the back of this chapel, like if you wait in this 3-hour line, everyone can have like their own little moment with the Black Madonna, this like statue. It's almost like black marble of Madonna and child. And then going somewhere else and seeing the only depiction that I've ever seen of the Last Supper round table from like a 14th century fresco.
That's pretty intense.
And then, and I also got to the Sagrada Familia more recently. And then just like the more I travel, I'll think of some, but like you're like, wait, not even their stories line up. Like,
no,
what's
nothing
going
lines
on
up.
here?
Yeah, nothing lines up. It's all because it's interpersonal, right?
Yeah.
It's what it means to us, and it's the storytelling of what's occurred, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Gosh, I love this conversation so far, and I love how much Brian's been able to jump in because, this is just like, like the whole thing with money and power and greed, that cycle where it's like you get a little bit of it and you want more and more and more and more, and it becomes like an addiction, and then pretty soon money becomes your god because it's what provides you stability, and you think by having this stability of having like this monetary value attached to your person, it's giving you some type of connection to something, but it's really not, and I'm just so curious, like, okay, so because we talked a little bit about the cryptocurrency and how that's going to be taking over, and how, like, is it something that you have found through research, or is it something that's intuitively come to you, or is it something because of your knowledge? How did you come to this conclusion that you believe cryptocurrency is going to be the way that we're moving into the future?
It's all of the above.
Yeah.
Right. So, first is the downloading and the channeling and the information that I get. And I do have somewhat of an apocalyptic view of the world. So I just believe we're in a collision course to an end. And if we don't auto-correct and quickly, which is why I've opened up my store, part of what I see has to happen is we have to awaken as many people as possible. And we have to make sure that the young children do not become us. And like they are, because they're coming in so awake and so smart and so far beyond anything we could have ever imagined. And yet we're telling them that they're the laziest generation there is. And they're just the opposite. They're just unwilling to do it our way.
Yeah, nonconformity.
Nonconformity. And my daughters are 22, 23, and 24. And they're very clear with me. I will not be you under any circumstances. And you destroyed the world. You destroyed the world, not them, and they're having to pick up our shit. You know, so I'm really that, like, if you ask me what lights me up, is making sure that I touch as many people as possible, because I do believe we're on a collision course, and we can self-correct, but it's very narrow. It's very, like I shared with you, Sarah, they've had visions of the end, right? And if we don't move quickly, it's coming. You just can't undo.
You can
what's
feel
been done.
it, you can sense it, and you can see it.
Yeah.
It's and people just want to be in denial. They don't want to accept. Yes. So they focus on, diverting to other things. But like the reality is we've killed our planet, and it's slowly dying.
Well, that's because most of these people are powerless, right? Like, you talk about how you can even make $250,000 in a financial institution.
Yeah.
It's on the backs of your investors. It's like a lot of reasons why I didn't want sales jobs, because I didn't want to go to my natural market and start being like a salesman and start using my friends that way. But when you start getting really removed from it, you're like, oh, well, I can take 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, stack it all up, and I'm not connected to the people that I'm hurting. Just like, commanders and chiefs and generals aren't connected to the soldiers that they're killing on the ground when they send them into a war that we don't even need to be in a country we don't even need to be in.
Yeah.
So that's the spiritual disconnect.
The spiritual disconnect.
If I hurt thousands or millions of people, but I get that much more power for the next election, I get that much more money for next year's salary, I don't care about the other person. So there's the real spirit. So but there's like it's like the 99% are powerless, so they do feel defeated.
Yeah, but that's where I'm going to disagree with you, right?
How do we give them power?
We are 100% not powerless. We actually have the capacity to alter, right? But there is such a conditioning and a patterning. Right. Even parents fall into the trap of believing that their millennials and the Gen X or whatever they are because they're attached to their phone, they're lazy, they're this, they're that. And they repeat it, right?
I think they're more informed, but we need like a unity there.
They're there, though. We're missing. I mean, look they elected Obama. They're pushing, Marianne Williamson should not even be on the platform. and they're pushing her platform, right?
Yeah.
And they're rallying around her. So they are there and they're defying the odds over and over. But what I was also going to say, this goes to, I'm very pro-capitalism, despite everything, right? Because the money is not the problem. It's who controls the money.
The Fed
is the problem, right? The Fed won't be here soon. I've seen that. But
because I almost jumped in earlier being like, okay, that whole financial industry just gets bailed out with trillions of money made into the big M.
So think about it. They came from the Freemasons. And if you follow what the Freemasons are, they're the mystery schools. And there's dark magic, and there's magic associated.
Educate me on the Freemasons.
Yeah, Brian, this is a whole thing.
This is a whole other ball game.
I mean, give
it a couple minutes. I want to hear it.
Okay. Yeah. So if the founding fathers, the Freemasons are a secret society, right? I mean, you've heard of the Illuminati, you've heard of all this.
Eyes Wide Shut parties.
Eyes Wide Shut party, right? And I don't know if you've ever watched the documentaries on the History Channel, but apparently Ben Franklin had all these like crazy sex parties underneath his basement, and
children being sacrificed.
Children being sacrificed.
Wait. I'm for the sex parties, maybe not the children.
Yeah, hey, I'm all in too, baby, but don't eat them with the Freemasons.
Let's not say it's all negative.
All right, we'll leave the sex parties alone, but we don't want children in them.
Yeah. Keep the children out.
Keep the children out, please.
We just killed that guy, right? In jail. Right? He went off suicide watch.
Oh, that's an interesting. There's a whole deeper thing with that.
But think about very fascinating. So when I got the download on the Freemasons and the black magic being associated to the American dollar, and tying it to various buildings. I actually have a client who was called to go and pick up soil and bring it over to the Mayan ruins, and so we can cleanse the soil in Washington, D.C. Like, she didn't know that I was having all these awarenesses as she was doing her work, because I have a lot of high-profile clients, but they're very involved in this world. They end up here. But as I was driving, I was on a journey across the country, and I was really having all of these knowings about the Freemasons, and I work with a couple of other women, and we do a lot of earth work together, really figuring out how we're going to save this world, truly, the human soul and the physical soul of the earth. And I started listening to this book called The Sophia Code, and what she talks about was she herself was in the sex slave trade of all the wealthy, and they actually fundamentally believe that they should sacrifice these women through rape in these ceremonies, and that's how they keep their wealth at the top 1%.
And have you ever heard of Teal Swan?
No.
So Teal Swan is from Utah, and she was raised in like a Mormon community, ended up
is she the one who wrote the Sophia Code?
No, but I don't think so. But she's you'll have to look up some of her stuff on YouTube. But she's a super fascinating person. She was born gifted. They tried putting medication in her. It didn't work. It actually heightened her abilities. She was taken under the wing of this guy who was the local veterinarian in the town she grew up in. And he was using the animals, the blood that he was taking from the animals, for part of the ceremonies. And she was used to go to southern Idaho and kidnap children to be used for these human sacrifices. She was also, and then as she got older, she was used for the sex. Yeah.
And it's funny
Crazy
you say
story.
that, because going back to Jeffrey Epstein, my mother keeps saying, like, my mother is one of us, but she doesn't think so, but she keeps saying, where are these girls? We keep talking about Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew and all the people, and Trump and Clinton who've been involved in it. Where are the girls? And why aren't anybody talking about them? They've disappeared. They're missing. And it's not even a public conversation. We're like, oh, Jeffrey Epstein got killed. Well, so what, right? But where are the girls? And why aren't we even discussing this on national television?
So is this, though, an extension of the same Freemasonry that you're talking about with Ben Franklin back then?
Let me look at that for a minute. It feels actually like something a little separate, but similar, right? This is just more... just feeding more of whatever these ill natural desires are.
Okay,
Right.
so before we lose it, I do kind of want to hear the connection between that and starting the Fed, because the Fed is still, there's a lot that's an unknown black box to me. So
Yes.
the more that I can hear about that.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of details. These are just things that have I've seen, and the people that I work with, we talk about it. But I don't know, if you can think about touching the American dollar for a moment, right? It feels really heavy, and it feels really deep, and there's a dirtiness to it, right? And yet, money's not dirty, and it's only a piece of paper, but it energetically feels gross, right? Like almost like you don't even want to put it in your pocket because you don't know who else has touched it, right? That's kind of what's happened underneath. When you think of the eye and you think of the triangle and you think of all of the symbols on there, these are all of the trainings of the mystery schools that have happened. And mystery schools in and of themselves are not bad. That's where most of us have trained and have learned the occult in a positive way, right? It's when you get the distorted person that actually shifts and distorts how this work is used. And that is what has touched. The Freemasons themselves are not bad. It's the few distorted individuals that pushed it. But remember, power does not want to be shifted, right? So when you think of the Fed, it wants to be controlled. Like if you watch the American Requiem on Netflix, they talk about, if you listen to some of the things that Alan Greenspan has written, it's disgusting. You can't believe that we, the American people, didn't get that he was putting these policies into place, right? They have systematically ensured that banking becomes the largest job creation in the United States over industry, technology, anything else. It's been part of the plan of the government. It's just we, the Americans, are not paying attention. They show in American Requiem, Jimmy Carter's administration intentionally, which he's supposed to be like the Democrat of all Democrats, right? Like he's the evil Democrat. And in his administration, they were so concerned that the universities were getting power because they were waking up and they were becoming educated. This was the 60s and the 70s and his administration wrote documents to systematically undo the control of the people and start flooding us with information to keep us in. They want us as drones, and we're droning.
What do you think happened to Kennedy?
Oh God, I don't know. I think he's with Hoffa. Has to be with Hoffa.
Yeah. There's something deep with that too. It's, oh my gosh, there's so many dark secrets.
It was the Fed. It was going back to a dollar backed by gold. So.
Oh wait, that's a good point.
That was the point that most everyone, I think, got to.
Really?
But when you're talking about the increase of banking, what I hear is the increasing rate of inflation. They want to increase the money production by moving it through banking, increase the supply of money, which really increases the inflation rate.
Right.
So really also either bigger M or devalued dollar would be the goal of that, right? And then, like, I was watching Venezuela a couple months before this all happened last year, and I've gotten to really look at the story of that country through a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. A guy who didn't want to write this book for 20 years because he knew he'd be killed, right? And then he actually came out and kind of did like a super freakonomics version, he came back and actually was able to add a little bit more later. But I got into this conversation just again because, it's not really, it wasn't the communism where like, oh, the socialists, you can't be socialist. Look what happened to Venezuela. I'm like, no, it was capitalism. It was U.S. capitalism.
100%.
That went down there.
Yes.
And destroyed that country by going through the government and bribing it. Then they were able to destroy it economically because enforcing a huge debt with then a huge interest on it, and then destroying it environmentally so that farmers couldn't even grow their own food, and coming back and just tearing this country apart, right?
Right. And you said something really key, because if you've watched the news recently, the farmers in the United States are the hardest economically hit right now.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, that's really what Trump's base is most concerned. The farmers got him into power, but they don't even know how they're going to keep their farms. I mean, we've subsidized the farms anyway. That is the biggest welfare system in the United States, is the farming. That being said, we're controlling their farming at this point, and we're not giving them the money they need because it's all the...
Yeah, and these Chinese deals are affecting that as well. And so
100%.
I do not want corporate socialism. Like I want the Facebook, the Google, the Apple, the Amazon to pay taxes. Right. And I do not want to give them subsidies, and I don't want to subsidize Walmart's workers because they're paying a starvation wage and all that. But I do also come, at least from the Northeast in Massachusetts, just south of New Hampshire, we have a real like no farms, no food policy. Right?
Agreed.
And so like, I don't know how long ago it was, but I knew it's at least been since the 50s that we've subsidized farms because we've always wanted more farms than what was necessary, just in case of, you know, huge drought, some sort of ecological disaster, blight, you know, wipes out a large amount of the farms. And so I do kind of shy away from looking at farm subsidies, at least as a total, maybe in part problems, you know, but like at some point, like I do believe farms are tough. You know, I also just think we should be giving, you know, livable wages to everyone.
Well, and I think too, right, if you really look at what the youth want, they want sustainable agriculture.
Yeah.
They don't want a farm that's pushing the antibiotics, the hormones that are having our young girls at the age of 7 or 8 with larger breasts than their mother because of the amount of hormones that are being pushed through these animals, right? So while, yes, I agree with you fundamentally on the practice of these farms, but we need the local sustainability and teaching individually people how to go back to farming, self-sustainability, only what we need.
Yeah, we drove past an industrial cow farm yesterday, you know, and it's like, hey, look, the cows, but I wish they weren't treated this way. Because I grew up around free range, but we also had a lot of green grass pastures, fields, and like we wouldn't have, I don't know if any beef industry here in Idaho. I mean, like there's some nice fields around Hagerman, but like you just wouldn't have the pasture to do it or the water to even make those pastures happen in a lot of that sense. So we'd have to be shipping it in. So yeah, I mean, the farms are a real discussion to me instead of just saying like, you know, flat out Apple should be paying taxes.
No, I mean everything, but to your point, right, and to what we're talking about, again, it's the transfer of power. The issues are not what's wrong. Capitalism is not wrong. It's who's running the capitalism, right? There has to be a new way of leadership, integrity, values, character value. You can run a very successful, profitable company. It's being proven over and over that the women CEOs, because they bring emotion into it, the emotional intelligence, which is overlooked. And I'm not saying men don't, because they do. And I'm very passionate about ensuring men don't get the wrong stick as women are coming up, right? But the emotional intelligence, the value systems, the morals, because it's a top-down, you can't breed from the bottom up. You have to breed from the top down in how a philosophy of a company or an organization is worked. If you're really driven by socio value systems, you can still be incredibly profitable, right? But for some reason, Americans have been, or people in general, have been convinced that profits equals asshole. Right? Like they go hand in, and that's not true. That's a lie that's been fed to us because that's a power over, power under power structure that keeps the small small and the big big. The minute you make it equal and everybody's winning and everybody's feeling powerful, it's exactly what Jimmy Carter's administration worked on making sure they got rid of. They didn't want people to rise and be equal and feel equal. And that's what it is. It's about a transference of power to people who want to share. And that does not negate capitalism, because there have been economic systems that when everybody's thriving, it thrives. It thrives really well, right?
Yeah, and you know, the whole cryptocurrency, I want to go back to that a little bit. What do you see happening once we switch to that? What do you see happening to right now? We have such a disparity between, the people that have and the people that have, don't have enough. And do you see that creating more problems for kind of the division between the two?
So it's a good question. I really haven't thought that far into it. So I'm just going to spitball in this one with you guys. But it would seem to me what doesn't matter what system's in place if the infection is not dealt with, right? The only thing it's going to do is elevate it to a global platform, a global currency, rather than individual currencies, right? So the large become larger and the small just become more. I'm just kind of looking at this, but if you can deal with the infection, which is how power is treated, right? Like I love Kevin Spacey in A House of Cards, and his very opening line is, if you had to choose between power or money, what would you choose? And he said power all day long, right? Because you can push the money around. So if you can deal with the core issue of the human value system, it can't not be good.
Then how do we deal with that? What is the true, what do we need to do to create change?
I really believe it begins with our children. I do. I think, rather than trying to convince our peers, vote for Trump, don't vote for Trump, vote for so-and-so, go for Joe Biden, right? I think we go for our children and we instill the belief system in them that they have the power to change the world into the place they believe that can happen. This younger generation fundamentally believes they were chosen to save the world. I can't tell you how many children I read that are overwhelmingly depressed because they came in with the knowledge that this world has to be saved by them and the burden's on them. They're in school talking every day about global warming. They're in school figuring out how they're going to escape the guns, right? They have the anxiety they carry, and they're super aware. They have a heightened spiritual sense. They're connected to the other side more so than any generation to date.
Yeah, I believe that full-heartedly. I mean, you can tell just by talking to the younger people.
Sorry,
go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. I just kind of had a little chain of thoughts. So if we have a system of money that isn't tied to gold anymore, right, in which we can increase through banking and inflation, and the Fed just prints another 2.3 trillion, and God forbid Rumsfeld talks about it on a Wednesday because on Thursday shit'll go down. But okay, so what I started thinking about was the FDIC.
Okay.
Right. So if we have this currency in dollars that's insured federally up to $100,000 per person, right?
Right.
Across multiple accounts, but per person in total. So are they trying to move away from that? Because if they want to crash the economy, you either A, move away from the currency, and I think the FDIC doesn't work then, or B, make it so that an amount like $100,000 of a unit, right?
Right.
Is no longer, like that amount no longer matters, which is when, hey, you're like, oh, how are you ever going to spend $3 trillion? You're going to be able to spend $3 trillion when it really looks more like, 500 million now, because you've overinflated and crashed the economy to the point, just like in Venezuela, where overnight you've got like 8,000% inflation. So then the only real assets become real estate.
Yeah. And even real estate, if you really think about it, right? Like the Native Americans had real estate.
Oh, sure.
And now they have none, right? Or if you were in Palm Springs and you own real estate in Palm Springs, every other lot is Native American owned. So I'm not exactly sure how it looks, but whoever owns those houses does not own the land, right? So even real estate is a very, I don't know, it's not as strong as we've been led to believe.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm jumping to Endgame because it's pretty much like
absolutely.
Indentured servitude is where we're trying to.
Yeah.
The whole thing's trying to get to
Yes.
us to there, right?
Yes.
And so indentured servitude, even if your parents had 80 to maybe $500,000 in investments somewhere, to turn that into something that is a currency that's no longer protected, B, an amount that no longer is meaningful, or do both at the same time through cryptocurrency and inflation. One of those things with Bitcoin, right, the original one, was that it is a set amount. Like you can't make more than, I forget if it was like 17 million or 24 million. Like at some point you only will have a certain amount of that currency. But then of course other currencies were created.
Right.
But also the crypto, like in the FDIC, is what I got was like the bank can't lose my records and just say like I don't have any money, right?
Well, you said that, and this is what came to my mind.
With crypto, you can lose a wallet and it's gone,
Yep.
or they can steal and hack your wallet and take it.
But
Yeah.
the FDIC can take your money. I mean, think about it. I don't know exactly what system backed Greece. Did they have a system similar to the FDIC?
Oh, I don't know about Greece.
Right, but think about it. They went, nobody can get their money. Like if there's no money to give, there's no money. It doesn't matter if you have the FDIC.
Okay.
Right? Like it's a false sense of security.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes total
so
sense.
even with that out there,
Yeah.
it's all just how fast we can create money and crash the system.
That's right. And if there's no
currencies.
money, or if the government, let's say, like some wacko president comes in and does not want to give you the money, you're not getting the money. This state, we can turn into a, hostile state in a heartbeat. And especially because we're so closed, right? Like my kids just watched Cambridge Analytica. They cannot believe people are not pissed. They cannot believe they put Bredix into place. They put the president of Brazil into place. They put Trump into place. They put all of these people into place, and they're systematically taking control, and nobody's pissed. Right? Like, and these are 23 and 24-year-olds, and they're calling me every day. Like, well, they've been talking about it forever. My kids are just blown away that we are asleep.
See, I kind of think that Cambridge Analytica is a natural progression of capitalism. They're like, if people aren't going to be informed and have that true invisible hand, then they'll come in and take advantage of that.
Yeah, you're 100% right.
Right? And so what I get pissed at is like, God, when I talk to a Trump supporter and they're like, he's never lied. And you're talking about don't talk yes Trump, no Trump, but I'm like, are you fucking shitting me?
Yeah.
How he lies 40 times a fucking day.
Yeah, and you're okay with it.
And I can pull up, and here, let's pull up another lie. Let's pull up another, and you can't even show them an example because, they're hypnotized by Fox News. Sarah, you are 100% right. If you only watch Fox News and they keep like saying the same thing over and over 12 times, the same
Did
talking point.
Did I tell that story? So I had a client who she works in a hospital, and she was talking about this man who developed dementia in his 50s, like super young, and his wife was super frustrated because he became addicted to Fox News. As soon as he started developing dementia, he was hooked. And he wanted to go to the White House for this big celebration for Trump. He is just gung-ho about it. And he's
mean
obsessed.
the celebrations that never really occurred because they fudged the pictures?
Yeah. Yeah, probably. Yeah. But yeah, the mind control behind the media. I always go back to that because like I feel like it's so, and that's probably why a lot of people are asleep too, is like they're paying attention to the wrong things.
Yeah,
they're not
and
going
it's
inward.
both sides, by the way. Like MSNBC and CNN don't make you feel any better.
No,
right? Like
Fox News is just probably one of the worst ones out there. But
but they all, again, it's all mind control to get you to believe what they want you to believe. Because if you think about it, we're fighting over health care, but we don't even know if our country's going to survive. Right? Yeah. We're fighting over things, and I'm not saying healthcare is not important, but they keep Americans spinning, including the Democrats, on issues that are not really core and fundamental. If we have no earth, we die. Healthcare does not matter.
Right.
But they are okay. And if you listen to the debates, and I'm going to go back to Marianne Williamson because I'm not saying that she would make the right president, but she is bringing the right conversation to the table. This is a moral conversation that we are not having amongst our people.
Yeah.
It is immoral to leave your neighbor destitute. It is immoral to allow our children to be shot in school simply because they want to be educated. It is immoral to be sex trafficking young girls, and we never even ask where they are. Like we have a real cancer in our souls here, and that I think is the larger conversation.
So have you heard of the missing 411 cases?
No.
So David Politis, I think he's a retired police officer, and he's been investigating these missing people he's written a series of books on it, and there's a documentary, and one of the children that fits into this missing 411 category is from Twin Falls, Idaho. It's in the documentary, but it's the stories are so weird, like people having missing time, like people who normally like will go and hike on a trail like dozens and dozens of times, and they'll go out there and then just disappear. They'll be with people and the people have no memory of how they got separated. There's weird things that kind of put it into the category of the missing 411. Like there'll be a weird weather pattern that will roll in, like storm clouds. And when they find find the bodies, sometimes they're alive. If they're alive, they have no memory. It's been wiped. And if they aren't alive, they're in a place where they physically couldn't get to. There's no site of animal trauma. They're in an area where search and rescue teams have swept over dozens of times, and with, dogs, and they'll just show up like out of nowhere. But it's like, why is this happening? And the craziest part is it's happening in a lot of national parks or state, kind of more remote areas, and they literally just cover these stories up. And he's like, why have these not been investigated? They can't explain it. There's no reason this person should have gone missing. And there's like hundreds of cases every year that fit into this missing.
So what is he speculating? Like, what's his theory?
The thing that I love about him, and he just wants to get the information out there, but he has no speculation. He's like, I have no idea what's causing this, but I think people need to know. And his whole thing is just kind of giving people the knowledge of this is something real that's happening. These people are going missing, and these families are getting no answers. There's no answer to be had. Mm-hmm. They're literally vanishing. And he doesn't come to any sort of conclusion. He's like, it could be anything. But I want you guys to, he invites whoever is reading his books or listening to him on interviews, like, I want you to
I really feel like you need to get him on your show.
Oh God, I wish.
Yeah.
I wish. I don't know. I mean, I don't even know where he's located. I want to say Colorado. I'm probably totally wrong. Yeah. But I've seen interviews with him on different, on Gaia. But the documentary is fascinating. Yeah. Because it covers all the mostly children that have gone missing.
Yeah. And there is, I know in a lot of the clientele that I get, a lot of people really believe that they have been somewhere else and tests have been done on them. And they are even, I do a lot of channeling with Toth and some other workers because I do a lot of DNA and cellular changing and patternings. As people are going through their awakening process, their physical body actually needs to change to carry the higher frequency. Oh. So I work, and a lot of people, that's why people get sick. That's why they get ill. They have these spiritual awakenings, and then their bodies crash, and they'll crash for like a year or two. You have to physically shift your DNA and your cellular memory to be able to carry the higher and higher frequencies. It is. And that's even if you look at the shamans, the shamanic realms, their food, they're really clear. Even Tesla, he was a yogi, and he believed that meat actually shifted his ability to connect to higher consciousness because all of his downloads, he said, came from somewhere else.
That's why you need to eat meat, Sarah.
Right. No, they actually say don't eat meat.
Oh, I thought you said it connected.
No, it actually blocks
you. It blocks you. Well, and I have this belief that when you eat a diet, especially with the meat that we're eating now, we're eating animals that are tortured, killed,
100%.
We're absorbing that energy body.
And all the crap they put into there. We're eating chemicals
Okay, so that actually gets back to, okay, I know you were just talking about sex trafficking, but I was actually thinking still corporatism, right?
Okay.
So we'll get back to sex trafficking.
Which kind of goes back to the the dark side of the Freemasonry, right? And because that's all part of it.
Okay, so on the sex trade, like what Sarah was just talking about was like the 411, right? But like you mentioned earlier, we don't have numbers, we don't have records, we don't have like missing persons reports, and
right.
It's like, and I got to tell you, that's kind of why it's been one of the side things in my mind, because I always go corporate, like everyone gets fed a cheeseburger in America. Like it's something that I can clearly see happens to 365 million Americans, right?
Yeah.
But like, if there were more reports on it, it would be more of a like higher level news story, because you'd say, okay, no, it's not just like 5 girls in the middle of nowhere. It's 50 girls from South Florida. It's 1,000 girls across the country. It's 5,000 every year. Here are their faces. Here are their names. Here are their family stories. Here's like people that we know that were last associated with them, and have that whole track down. So is that story just being pushed under, or do you have like a better idea of like?
I haven't really thought that. I haven't looked at it on a deeper level. But let's just even talk culturally, right? Just I'll give you some thought. Just really kind of talk about this. So up until 20 years ago, or even, I would say 20 years ago, like the 1980s, it was normal for men to have mistresses. Like it wasn't like a thing.
Courtesans.
It was just, like it just was what you did. And if the man was having a mistress,
because
it didn't matter.
Because a woman was a possession and not just.
It's like that article in the Good Housekeeping magazine from the 50s where it's like, if your man comes home and he seems like he's been gone for a long time, don't ask him where he's been.
Right.
But that's literally what I mean. There was a woman was a possession.
It was a possession.
It was a thing.
Yeah.
Wild.
It was, you could have 2 because you didn't care about the feelings of the first one.
Yeah.
Or the marriage.
That's right.
The man is working hard. He needs to have another outlet.
And she can't relate to me. She's here to have my baby.
And when we're talking about men's
her job
issues,
is to raise the kids.
Like that's one of those things. There's still this, you got to go for the hottest girl because you got to get the prettiest car. Right. You got to get the next iPhone. You have to have the hottest girl because it's a possession and it's how it looks, right?
Right.
And so that's one of those things that we get sold, right? And so this idea of a woman as a possession is just, there's so much pile up of a base on that on a man's psyche.
Absolutely.
Right,
and a woman's psyche, right? We're both suffering from this, right?
All the makeup, and you have to be the one that looks the prettiest. And
that's right.
And
that's
so,
right.
Like that undercuts any other sort of connection. Like I love it when you meet somebody and you have a conversation and then you're turned on.
Right.
You're like, whoa.
Totally.
This person.
And mind blown when it doesn't fit the box. Right? Like that's my new thing. Like because I have a box. Like I'm very clear. Surfer, blah, 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 blah. Right? Name the whole line. Like, but I have more of the masculine traits in that sense, but I have a whole clear idea of what my guy's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And then lately I'm like blown away because Idaho men are a little bit different than California and New York men, right? But I'm like, holy shit, these are some deep ass men that I am like really intimately excited about, right? Like the shit, like you guys have depth.
Well, there's such a connection to earth here.
Yes.
Like connection to the land. A lot of men here like to hunt. They're very like
but deep.
But very deep.
And it's
I think it comes through that.
It does.
It comes from that. Yeah.
It does. But going back to what we were talking about, right? With why aren't we tracking these women? So only 20 years ago, did we even have a conversation that there should be monogamy in a relationship? And that's driven by women, although I will say women nowadays are becoming the number 1 lead to open marriages. Statistically.
I was just talking with Brian on the way over because I have heard this time and time again. The wife leaves her husband or she cheats on him and
it's
all these
switching.
Wounded. It's switched.
It's switched. And the younger women are the ones that are advocating open marriages and the men are falling apart.
Yeah.
They're not digging this. Like it was great when it was them driving on, but anyway, it's a whole other topic.
It's an insecurity thing. It's a hard thing.
Absolutely. And it's a power over, power under.
Yeah.
If you're not controlling the situation and you're not in charge of how it looks, then there's vulnerability, right? You're at risk.
Right.
Well, can I get vulnerable for a quick second?
Yeah, please.
Twice in my life. Once when I was really young, I cheated on my girlfriend. I
Yeah.
had like one of those like, moments. I'm caught up in the moment. It's exciting. And I went and did that. And I was so guilty. I just like drank myself to sleep for like 6 weeks straight, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. And then I was like, I'm never going to do that again. 8 years later, I found myself in another relationship. And after a while, like something came up, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, how can I don't even have like the youth that I didn't know what was happening, right? Or even like saying I was inebriated, right? To say it on, to pin it on. And so there's this side of me that says like, I don't know if I could ever be in an open relationship because of the insecurity. Honestly, because the girl that I'd be going out with probably could get more guys than I could ever get girls.
Seriously,
right?
I get that.
Mine as a possession.
Yeah.
But also on the same side, like, I don't know, like, it's a tough conversation to have. Like, maybe if I had said in those relationships, like, hey, I'm not getting what I want completely in this moment from one person, which is rather understandable.
Yes.
Right? Like, I'm not trying to defend my actions, but saying, like, I wouldn't have had to seriously hurt that other person. I wouldn't have had to kind of, like, destroy my life again in that moment. And, like, we could have understood maybe a little bit more of the humanity that we all carry. I don't know. That's like a tough conversation to have.
Love that you're. So I'm doing a talk in 2 weeks at 11 Romance event. And my conversation is about the power of authentic communication. And that's exactly what you said, right? And I'm a huge Oprah quoter, when you know better, you do better, right? The crime is not in the first action. The crime is when you choose not to learn from it. Or not the crime, but when you choose not to learn about over, and then you
have to repeat it over and over, and that's not fun.
Yeah, but I mean, the fact that, like, I'm sitting here admiring you, the fact that you even got that. Like you have that depth to that. That's huge,
That's
right?
That's why I moved to Idaho.
That's why because you're one of those Idaho men.
I couldn't leave. When I called my mom and told her, I was like, I'm moving to Boise, Idaho 10 years ago. She's like, really? I'm like, yeah, it sounds weird for me to even say. But like, I was on a road trip again around all the country and I couldn't leave this place.
Yeah, there's something to it. And it's really a huge awakening state, But I'm going to go back to the corporate room for a minute, right? So I've grown up in corporate.
It all ties together.
So, I mean, I don't know. Hopefully they'll never listen to this. But, part of it, there was a very wealthy man in Beverly Hills, because I was in LA for a very long time. There was a wealthy man in Beverly Hills who was on our board. And the men, I didn't learn this until later because they never invited me, but the men all go to his house and he had a glass floor. And they would all have their sex parties. And they would sit up on top and they would watch these sex parties. That's how they attracted the investors, the VCs, right? Like, if you think of Silicon Valley and these young, and I watched a whole documentary on this, these young tech geeks who finally were like never even looked at, if not beaten up to like the bone, all of a sudden are getting the hottest girls in the world. That's power. Right? And they're not changing it, right? And they're saying that women are following. There's a whole other story to that. But this is why these girls are not on the front lines, because this is how business is driven. Titty bars, hanging out, drinking all night. And if you're not in that in crowd and you're not out drinking, you're missing out on the opportunity for power.
Well, that also shuts out most women. Then.
That shuts out unless you allow them and you show up, because there's a couple of women in the boardroom who are very happy to make their money and be apathetic and allow this to happen. And I remember asking one of my fellow women, like, how can you be okay? Like, it makes me cry. Like, some of these wives I know personally, I'm close to them. How can you know what you know and sit at a dinner with them and be okay? And it would be reverse if a male, it's not just a woman, but how are you okay that this shit ass behavior is acceptable? Because there's no integrity there,
but
right?
I love that question isn't asked of the dudes.
What? Yeah. Oh, 100%. Right. But truthfully,
It's not the one person that's like,
yeah, great
hey,
point.
I've
Great point.
made strides to get into this one position above the glass ceiling.
Yes.
Why aren't you now taking control of it instead of holding all the
Thank
other
you.
men accountable?
See,
and
this
saying
is why we want men to walk with us.
Yeah.
That your statement alone right there.
Yeah.
I'll watch out because I'll catch it on the other side too. Because every now and then I'm talking to a feminist and I'm like, actually, you're kind of putting men down there. Like we.
That can't happen.
Yeah.
That can't happen.
Then again, it's the power struggle. Like it shouldn't be about one gender versus the other. It should be that we're equal, and I think that's where we're trying to get to. It's just equal, and like everybody should be. Equal.
Yeah, we're trying to raise up women. You know. And people try to pull the same shit with the Black Lives Matter. No, we need to elevate Black lives. That's what that says. It's not saying we're not equal. It's like we need to make sure that the Black lives are elevated.
That's right. And it's funny you say that because what I was thinking of, I have one of my grandmother's friends is a Black couple in Long Island because we grew up in Long Island. And I was talking to him last year and we both have the same exact conspiracy theories, but I had never heard this. He said, Kirstin, and he has a New York accent, but he said, I'm walking around wondering where are all the Black men? Where are they? Where are the same like we're asking where the women are? Where are the Black men outside of the ones that we know are being shot? But you're not finding them around. Like there's a missing of these people. And where are they?
Can we recognize something in the room?
Yeah.
We're talking about currency.
Yes.
We're talking about women as possessions, right?
Yes. And Black men as possessions.
Right.
And whoever in time, right?
I think we're talking about people as currency.
People as currency, yes.
And using the women who are missing, using, of course, the slave labor that we have made reparations for.
Yep.
And we're still keeping, that skin color down. I don't want to use the word race anymore, by the way.
Okay, fine.
Because we're really like human race. Not that you did. I'm just putting it out there. Like, because when we start saying different races, that's not accurate.
Yeah, you're keeping us polarized is what you're saying?
Yeah. But the thing I wanted to tie it with was like, okay, if somebody at the head of a corporate table doesn't care that they are, doing, the death of 1,000 slices, but really they're getting their percentage extra from each and every person in America, right? Mm-hmm. There's no spirituality, there's no morality because there's no connection to all the people they're hurting. If a general is sending, 100,000 troops to go kill 1 million people over here in this country, it's that many again slices and deaths, but they don't feel it because they're immoral and not connected to it. And this is also relating to the food. I got to tell you, because I don't connect with the thousands, like 10,000. How many cows have I killed? Right, every 2 chicken wings down, another chicken soul that I've killed. I don't connect to that because I'm like removed from the murder, removed from the death through this industrialized like meat complex, and so no matter what, like. We got away from village life. Yes. We got away from like, it's my pumpkins for your zucchini.
Yes.
And like, I see what I do in the harm to the village. And, maybe it's karma, maybe it's just memory. But like 10 years later, somebody's going to be like, yeah, you were a dick to me. Mm-hmm. And I still have to own up to it. So there's no responsibility when we have these like spheres of influence and then like no spheres of responsibility coming back. So,
I want to speak to that because I want to tie it back also to the corporate and to the spiritual, right? Because it's both realms. So part of when I first started coaching, my first coaching class was a group of psychics. Now, I don't know if you understand, but they have no relation to money. None. They think it's evil. Like it's the root of all evil. And I really love money. I do. So to say that I don't like money, I'd be lying, but I love money. Who doesn't like to have nice things? And I grew up poor, and I've had days where we didn't know how we were going to eat, and there's no spirituality in not knowing how you're going to feed your children. None. Like there's nothing spiritual about that. That energy, there's no making it
Plus
out of life.
Plus it keeps the fear going, which
keeps the fear
blocks
going.
You. Yeah.
So this whole, the spiritualist who, to me, it's like the biggest line of bullshit that spiritual people have ever been sold. That they are not allowed to have money. Like, I don't know where they bought that, right? Because that's the same. I don't know if the law of physics or hermetics, the same people who are wealthy and rich have the same energy of those that are poor and hate money. They're exactly the same people. They're just on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? What really needs to happen is the spiritual people need to get their money going and their currency flowing. That's the transfer of power.
Oh,
right?
Totally. Yeah.
That's the we have to teach them how to make money and let it be okay that money is
Not look at it as evil.
That's right. But what you pointed to is the lack of responsibility. Right? So right now we have this influx of people reading. It's like really cool to read tarot and really cool to be a medium and really cool to read people's energy. But if you are not taught, like Native Americans, Peruvians, Africans, if you're going to tribal Africa or tribal Celtic nations or Nordic nations, they are trained from birth the sacredness and sanctity of the connection of all, right? People are coming in doing this work. Oh, I can read your energy. Let me go in and move shit around, right? They have no permission. They have no right. They have no understanding. They have no honoring. They have no connection to the earth. They have no connection to the greater responsibility. It really fucks some shit up, you know? Like, I personally get really angry. So part of what I teach in my teachings with my students is the importance, of getting your relationship right with money, right? Like, get it right. Having money is not bad. It's just now, and the more people who have money, look at Deepak Chopra, look at Michael Beckwith, look at Oprah Winfrey, and what they're doing with their money. That's a transfer of power. Mm-hmm. They are awakening people on a daily basis because they have the money to do so. Doesn't make them bad for having nice things. So we have to wake up both communities, but the spiritual community has to take some responsibility also in understanding what it really means to be a spiritual person. Mm-hmm. And it's not just knowing the Bible or knowing the Quran or Kabbalah or whatever it is you study.
Well, one of the things that came to mind for me is in order to have money, you almost kind of have to a lot of times do a job that generates money. Mm-hmm. And for people who are in that kind of spiritual realm or like psychics or, you know, people that are in that kind of operating in that, on that level, how do you like find money in that? Like, I'm not really forming my words correctly, but I think you can probably understand what I'm saying. Like, how do you find money in that? Like, how do you achieve any type of success financially, or do you have to have it as part of you, but do another job to generate the income? And then, because if that's your purpose, is to help people and do readings and be a healer or do Reiki, things like that, how do you make money doing that? Because a lot of times the people that end up going down that road, there isn't a lot of money in it.
Well, there is a lot of money in it.
Okay,
right? Like,
that's what I want to hear.
Like Deepak Chopra has proven that, right? He doesn't do Reiki, but he's proven there is an incredible amount of money, but he's also a neuroscientist, which we don't want to. But there's an incredible amount of money in it, and I'm going to start with what he says.
Okay.
Follow your heart, and everything else follows, right? It doesn't mean, however, and this is the misunderstanding, most people, and performance coaching is my passion. Like, it's not, because it's across the board. I can bridge my spiritual world and my business world together, right? Most people want success, don't want to do the hard work, and then bitch that it didn't come to them.
Got it.
Right? So sometimes you have to go mow a lawn for a year to build a foundation, to help build a business. Like, my store didn't just open. I've sacrificed a lot, and I've put everything I had into it, and I waited a lot of years as I was forming my business plan, right? It's still not flourishing, but I have to work hard. I don't just wake up one day and go, I'm going to make money and do my Om chant and
law of attraction,
right? Like, and then not get up and go to work, right? Like, faith without works is dead. We know that line, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to do the work for it to show up, and I think that's kind of the missing link. Everybody wants to be successful, right? Like Napoleon Hill. Everybody wants to be successful. Maybe 1% of the people are willing to do what it takes. right? And are you really committed to the commitment? And that's what you have to ask yourself. And people will say yes. But when I start going through in my coaching and we look at what they're doing, their feet are different than their mouth.
Yeah.
Right? They're not committed to what they say they're committed to. They want to do Reiki. Like, I love Tony Robbins telling his story. He did it on everybody for free because he was lit up, right? He did it for free. And he kept doing it and he kept doing it. And then one day it happened. It didn't just happen overnight. The guy couldn't eat.
Right. So it's the follow through, the discipline.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The sacrifice. Like, you have to have the motivation to get there.
Yeah. And you have to be willing to fail, right? Like, Bill Gates only invests in companies people who have failed at least 3 times. Why? Because you have to know how to fail.
Yeah.
Right? You have to be willing to fail. The biggest reward is in the failure. We know that firsthand.
Because that kind of breaks down a little bit the ego and helps
you. You also know how you're going to get up.
Yeah.
You know, how are you going to fight through the hard times? Because there's no guarantee anything works. Right? And that's the misunderstanding. Everybody says they want to be successful, and then they make it about the thing that says, it's like saying an artist can't be successful. Well, who said that? Mm-hmm. Right? That's the artist who doesn't want to get up and figure out how to make it happen every single day.
I'm glad you're telling me this, because sometimes I'm like, I'm just a starving artist. Like, I just don't have the skills that make money. Like, you know, somebody who has, like, you know, high IQ, intelligence.
Yeah, but you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And it breaks that whole philosophy down, right? We're not teaching our kids how to manage a checkbook. We're not teaching our kids how to deal with money. We're not teaching them the value of putting in time and effort. We're teaching them to go to work 9 to 5, put money into a 401k that, by the way, when the stock market crashes, you have nothing anyway, so they just took all your money, right?
Yeah.
So you might as well go to Vegas.
Right. You might as well enjoy.
Yeah. Like, people are like, why don't you put money into your 401k? Why? So I can give it to the government tomorrow?
Oh, sorry. I've been doing math on the side. And
are you running algorithms too?
No. Basic net worth of the top 1% of America.
Oh, shit.
And
are you really that smart?
No. I just did the math.
I'm like, wow, okay.
No.
Okay, but roughly $8.9 quintillion, right? And if you paid people, let's say they paid out all their money into wages, right? And you paid people $15 an hour. Okay. And they worked 2,000 hours a year.
Okay. What does that equate to on a daily basis?
Living wage, $15 an hour, 2,000 a year, so that's $30,000 a year.
Oh, I mean, how many hours a week do they work?
2,000 hours is generally the 50 hours. 50 weeks by 40 hours a week.
Got it.
That's like a generic number.
Yep.
Okay, so standard year, standard pay rate, right? Then you could have 297 trillion man hours as a store of goods and services.
And how much money's left over for the rich?
No, that would be all their money. So, you know, if they did 296 trillion man hours. Okay. So one of the things that I think about when I get to this point, it's like, yeah, Oprah and some musicians are doing it, some people with money are doing it. They're building like a school in Africa, or 10 schools, or 100 wells, or something like that, right? But I really like science fiction. I really like it. And there's a lot of things about science fiction that show me like what humanity, the story of humanity might be in different situations. Dystopian, utopian, you know, Star Wars versus Star Trek. Are we a, you know, unified planet that's now, you know, going out into the galaxy, the Federation, or Star Wars? Are we all just doing even worse on like Tatooine and fighting each other, and there's a Senate that controls everything that turns into a, you know, military coup? Where is the military coup not happening right now in the world? Right. And it's almost easier and want to be more palatable to like look at these stories in science fiction, right? So I love it for almost the human nature, not the whatever trying technological, like Gibson predating the internet or EDM. But what I think about when I see a number like 297 trillion years of man hours is, I understand that people want to store wealth for future power, right? Because they say if I have 500 billion today, I'll have 550 billion tomorrow. My kids will have 800 billion, maybe plus, more, minus, and then they'll be even that much more powerful, right? What I want to see is at least some of those fuckers say, you know what? We have a huge store of goods and services, and the best way to help our planet is to redistribute it. And the best way to redistribute it is to do really large works, right? And so, like, what are some of the huge projects? Like, I know we got like SpaceX, you know, let's try to do a moon race again. Good or bad, whatever, but it's like a big project. It's like a big, hey, you know, we're in 2019, we've got a lot of technology that isn't being used, could really be helpful. We're still trying to like push solar, push wind. We're getting to the like kind of the end of like the tail end of how many extra % we can get out with current technology there. But like, what are the really big works that we could do for humanity across the globe? You know, could we make those big infrastructure, huge buildings?
Something tells me you've seen it. Like, you have an idea.
I've got lots of ideas.
Yeah, like intuitively, they're telling me you have a whole plan.
I've got tons of plans.
Yeah, you have you have, and I don't know, do you do statistical analysis? Is that what you do?
No, I do more like the financial stuff and helping people hide things with pixie dust.
Okay, but you
that's
have...
not what I want to do, so don't put me in that box.
No, because now I'm being an intuitive,
Yeah.
right? So what they're showing me is you actually can do mathematical equations in your head, right? They're showing me like,
Sure.
yeah. And it drops down, and it somehow looks like, it turns out, it ends up in information, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about like what can really be done, like you said, like we have no power, right? Like you really fundamentally believe that. But what they're showing me is you in particular are so incredibly smart, but you're telling yourself you have no power, right? But you have the plan. You just don't know that you can make a difference with it, right? So you stop. And that right there is why we're talking about this.
Okay, so honestly, I've been bipolar for a long time, right? And I had a manic 2 weeks after I left college. And in that 2 weeks, I made an entire notebook of everything that I wanted to. Now, and this was a moral thing. Everything that I wanted to change in the world for the better.
There you go.
All huge.
That's what I saw.
The words, looking back now, are grandiose because they were just huge.
Yeah,
huge
but I gotta say, see, somebody has you believing that it's grandiose, but it's the grandiosity.
Yeah.
And it's the balls.
Yeah.
To stand up and say, we're doing this.
Well, what happened in reality was my car got stolen. I got the car back within a few hours because I was able to file a police report right away. The notebook, the bag that the notebook was in, had been tossed out. And most of that stuff I was just unable to ever kind of recover.
You're going to get it back, by the way.
Yeah, I hope so. I really do. But then now I'm still in that spot of fear. It's like, wait, I'm older. I've gone through life changes since then, right? I'm older, and what were those, like, how do I re-envision
so first of all,
like better humanity? Because I want a better humanity for all.
Yeah.
And it still does take business things, but how do we do it with those moral connections?
Yeah, and so I'm going to tell you specifically for you. Can I intuit for a few minutes with you?
Sure.
Okay, so first of all, study Tesla, because your answers lie in that.
I love Tesla.
Yeah, study him. Actually study how...
We're going to go back?
Yeah, right. So study how he pulled information down. And they tell me Sarah has seen you do this before. Have you seen him pull stuff out of nowhere? And you're like, how the hell did that come out of his mouth?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, like not, and I know you have some goofy stuff too, but like really, like you're pretty genius, right? So study Tesla, because he actually downloaded. Einstein's another one.
Yeah.
He downloaded, but Tesla, I feel like you'll relate to. You'll
Brian
get how he did it.
definitely has that ability because he's had experiences, and he'll talk about it a little bit sometimes here and there, but there's definitely an ability for him to download.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, and once that happens, what happens is the reason you suffered from the bipolar, and the more you get in tune with this, the more peace you'll have around it. is you actually need that break from reality to get the grandiosity and get the information you're supposed to get. That break in reality is your connection.
Yeah. So like I read so much random stuff, and I almost like the noise better because I get a better picture of what's going on when I hear all the little bits, like almost the commercial white noise static.
Yeah.
Because then you're like, oh wait, that relates to this, relates to that, relates to this, relates to that. And then when I go get quiet, you know, that subconscious work, all of a sudden I'll have this thought and I'll be like, oh, but they all pull together through this.
Yes, exactly. Like so it's almost like what they're showing me is you have a funnel of numbers. I don't know why they keep showing me the square root sign. So that's just kind of a symbol that you get information, you get mathematical downloads, and then you can filter through the information and you can see how it's supposed to happen, right? And what I also see is there's something about how you interact with Sarah that frees you up a little bit to be smarter than you want the world to see.
Well, this whole podcast was Sarah's idea, and I don't get to even talk or really express a lot of things without disability. So I got to thank Sarah for even getting me here with you in this moment.
I knew I wanted Brian on. Like it was one of those things too where I was talking to another guy about setting up a podcast, and then I remember like for some reason I was just like drawn to Brian. First, he's incredibly intelligent. His storytelling ability is amazing. Like he remembers things really well. And like I'm, you hear me talk, I'm like bumbling around. Like my thoughts don't come out of my mouth. They just like,
see, I don't experience you that way, but that's a whole other topic.
That's just how I feel. That's how I feel. So like, obviously I gravitate towards Brian because I'm like, he just would bring such a great dynamic to every conversation because everything he says has thought to it. There's an incredible amount of emotion and sharing, and plus he just has a really good podcast voice, which is a bonus.
But you know what's funny is what you're underestimating is the value of your presence, right? Because he needs a conduit. Yeah. And your energy is a conduit, and for people, like, how do I say this? You get to break, like that break from reality is so essential for you. You need to know you can break and come back, break and come back, break and come back, right? The story of the beautiful mind, right? You know, how he broke and like he would download this information, right? That's how they all are. Everybody who's been able to do that.
It's a gift, yeah.
It's a gift. And we need our conduits. Like I have people who are in my life who serve as my channel and allow me, or I'm a channel for others for their information. That's the beauty of what you two are creating here, because you are the connection. Like it has to flow, right? So I guess I'm supposed to tell you, don't underestimate your role as a conduit. For you really, really have to drop the illusion that you have no power.
I mean, okay, so I'm learning that you've come from a really big business finance background, right? And what I always kind of wanted to move towards, at least what seemed was just possible, was more like just consulting in businesses, because I get really good at looking at their numbers, but I also see their processes. I'm very process oriented. But like literally, how do you go from grandiose ideas to like actual VC? I mean, I've emailed Bill Gates foundations. I've emailed like other kind of angel investors, startup areas for like green energy and stuff like that. And, I had a friend who was telling me like, you need to just make a business plan and start like going after stuff in China, because that's really where it's at. And it's like, how do you actually make grandiose ideas that would still benefit people and still make a profit become a reality?
Okay, so there's two ways that you have to look at this. You have to, and this really dovetails back to Sarah's question, how did I get here? Right? Like how did my two worlds, because I'm at the convergence of both of my worlds, right? I left my corporate role in June, but I have the store and I'm training people. I have a lot of stuff happening, but I really want to change leadership. Like that's what I want to see, because they control everything about us, right? We have to go to work every day and people are not happy. We have heart attacks at 50 years old. Men are dying of heart attacks at 50, just dropping dead, right? Your question is twofold. One, you accelerate your spiritual growth, whatever that means to you. Whether I have a feeling quantum physics feels very important to you.
Okay.
Right? So, like, whatever your spiritual, whatever your spiritual journey is, you have to accelerate that, right? Because this is in the, I love mindvalley.com, right? They talk about bending reality. And if you listen to all of these CEOs, they bend reality. So you're training in these realms, in the quantum fields, in the spiritual realms, and I don't care what you pick, it all gets you to the same place, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the first part. The second part is, and I love this, I'm actually just starting it, so I'll let you know how it goes, but I heard one of the CEOs on mindvalley.com say he makes a date with himself every week on how, like, he picks whatever his goal is. He picked, I think his goal was $1 billion. I don't have that goal, but his goal, and he makes a date with himself. How is he going to do that? Every week, right? And that's a real planning session for himself. So you have your goal, and then you have to kind of back end your strategy, right? So, and that's where the spiritual realms and the quantum realms and bending reality realms and all of that mirror our business minds.
Yeah.
And that's the premise of Think and Grow Rich, right?
I love that you're telling Brian this right now, because I probably wouldn't have been able to drag him into it and get in a meeting with you. I know there's something deeper, and like there's something to Brian that's like there is a deeper purpose to his life. And
the one that I've really, really wanted to do for a long time that I still can't remember is this plasma arc technology. And there was 10 companies doing it in the 80s and the 90s in America. One of them was StarTech in Connecticut. And they did it better because what they would do is they'd take trash, and they could take hazardous trash like old used batteries. They could take, baby shit diapers, right? And they could turn it into energy because they would vaporize it through really high voltage plasma arc, right? And what you'd get out of that was like kind of like a synthetic gas, like a methane or something, and you could put that into buses. But you also got more energy out of the heat that was produced to not only run it, but to put electricity back into the system. And if I know a couple things about America, is that we're really good at producing trash. And not only that, but hazardous
in
trash.
many different ways, right? Energetically and
absolutely.
And so, what happened with these companies is they were shut down. What happened with StarTech specifically is it was bought by a Russian oil conglomerate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that technology was taken away. A couple times I've heard, I think they were both in Oregon, or one was in Oregon, one was in Washington. Startups tried to do it again, and it was like, oh, you just don't hear about them after a little while. And so here's like this really great technology, which is kind of almost like the Back to the Future 2 car, where you fill it up by putting some trash in the back, but that there's so much energy, and that this process actually would like reduce things at the molecular level. So what you'd really get is like 10% of the mass, mostly carbon, very hot, which at the same time we're also getting into like carbon nanotubes. Now usually they use like enzymes and they start from carbon up, but really hot, mostly carbon is a good place to start if you're using carbon to even just make like foundations, substrate. We're running out of actual sand for concrete. So if you just want like
that's fascinating.
There's like wars over sand right now.
I did not know that.
And they're ripping apart rivers in different countries, just ecologically going in.
That makes me want to cry, right? Yeah. Because as somebody committed to saving the earth, that is one of my commitments. Like, you can feel her, you can feel Mother Earth, like crying.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that's all in just that one kind of idea. How to clean it up, how to make it better, how to provide something better.
So how they say it's in the questions you ask that it's not right. The questions you ask are what really defined how you're going to get to where you want to go. So they're telling me you need to ask new questions now, right? There's new questions for you to ask. Who do I need to meet? Who's in my sphere of influence? Who can help me knock on that VC's door? What VCs should I really be meeting? Just because they say they're green doesn't mean they actually give a shit. just means they got that there's money there.
That's
right?
totally true. Yeah.
So start asking yourself and simultaneously working with whatever your belief system is. You go pretty far, pretty fast. So you
that should be my license plate. Yeah. That's literally my license plate.
So accelerate your learning in that realm.
Yeah.
That is your fastest path to bending reality. But your questions are, who is my sphere of these are your immediate questions. This is your homework. Who is my sphere of influence? Who do I know? What are the 6 degrees of separation to who they know? How do I connect with them? And remember, you never to sell. You have to hit somebody 3 or 4 times before they're even interested in talking to you, right? So start at relationshiping, right? Power of authentic communication. People do business with people they like, right? So don't go in saying, I have an idea for you. Get to know them, because in that way you find out if it's even somebody you want to do business with. Do you?
And when you become a millionaire, help a girl out. Because I'm your conduit. Right. So do I get like a percentage of this?
She does, actually. She should. Yes. Right?
Yeah.
It's the muse, right?
Like, I have a feeling more like a shared community, like not condos, but like something more like that. Like just let's have everyone in close proximity and create our own village.
Okay, I'm good.
Like I might take the.
Can we have goats?
I might take the tree fort tonight, and you take the giant ropes. Goats on the side.
No, she gets goats inside.
Yeah.
Inside?
How about a potbelly pig?
Potbelly
pig.
I said inside. She can have inside.
Yeah.
Just have like a little farmhouse inside, because there's going to be
have multiple locations. If you
she can have a bedroom on the second floor of the barn.
Yeah, because remember, if you don't save the world, we're going to have no oxygen here. Right?
Plants. No, it's going to be tons of plants.
Okay.
And like,
all right.
You know those pushed out windows that are kind of like bay windows?
Yeah.
Just in plants everywhere there. And like sunrooms and like.
Awesome. Are you going to recreate the Amazon for us so we can get our oxygen back?
No, it'll be more like that. Like not the space, but what did they call it? The Earth one. The biodome, you know. We'll do like a lot of like biome stuff with plants.
Okay.
Well, that might be where we end up if we keep ruining our oxygen levels.
How would we recreate the Amazon rainforest right now? Like,
I don't know.
Collective consciousness, bring rain.
Did you see the map where they took that fire and they placed it over the U.S. and it extended from not Maine, but like let's say Connecticut down to Georgia, and over into like Louisiana? That's the size of the fire.
See, that makes me want to cry. Like when you think about how we're hurting her, which is our sustenance, right? That's how we have to live. That's how my children, or, I want grandchildren. They don't want babies, but.
Yeah. Your daughter expressed that to me.
Did she tell you?
I don't blame her.
You got my daughter's, her whole spiel.
Well, that's good. They're young. That's the thing about Idaho. Kids have kids young here, and it kind of pisses me off.
My daughter is, my oldest she believes that procreation and recreation of human beings is 90% of the problem of our poverty.
It's also why they want us to not have abortions religiously and not have access to birth control governmentally, because the more, especially young kids having kids, then we're put into the struggle. The trauma cycle increases more frequently, and then we are also stuck in low-paying jobs with less opportunity, and that's exactly what the indentured servitude elite wants.
That is my daughter right there. You just articulated my daughter's belief system.
Yeah, the last week I started saying that about the military, right? If there was more education, more opportunity, less people would go into the military to get $30,000 to put their lives on the line every year.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I said it honestly because he had a kid in the military, and then he started talking about his nephew in the military, and we took a break, we had to like second part that one because it hits home. But that is like the kind of truth of the cycle that we're in.
That's the truth of the cycle. So when you ask, like, how do we recreate the rainforest, or how do we recreate any of this, or even address what you're speaking of, right? Or even talk about those missing people that you were talking about. Like, we don't even talk about what matters. Human life does not matter, right? It is, I know my role is to make sure you know who you are, right? And that you know who you are, and you know who you are, and you are very clear on your part. And I do everything I can to lift you up so you can do your part.
I love that.
That's the key.
That's awesome. And that's the perfect place to end it, because we do have to wrap up. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Kirstin, for coming in. It was such a treat talking with you, and I'm so glad Brian got a reading.
Thank you for letting me read you.
Oh, that was amazing. I totally, yeah.
Yeah, thanks again. It's been a treat.
Thanks.
The Outer Fringe was recorded at Triii-Point Studios. Copyright 2019. All rights reserved. Statements and opinions made on the show do not necessarily reflect the views or beliefs of Triii-Point Studios or its members.